song that was from Dil Apna aur Preet Parai, and the song is Ajeeb Daasta Hai Ye. Okay? Ajeeb Daasta Hai Ye, कहाँ शुरू कहाँ खत्म, ये मंजिलें हैं कौन सी, ना वो समझ सके तुम्हें मुबारक है कि तुम किसी के दूर हो गए, तुम्हें मुबारक है कि तुम किसी के दूर हो गए, किसी के अपने पास हो कि हमसे दूर हो गए, अजीब दास्तां।
How the other batches have done. I'm sure they must have done it. We are not discovering it.
No, we don't have to discover the new business spot.
I got a few things to take care of.
Maybe something like 100%.
We've been on this campus for the last 2 days now, and most of us have come back after 25 years. So we're very pleased with some of the changes we see, and we thought this would be a nice opportunity to interact with the current students. So what I will do is I will ask each of the panelists who are here to talk briefly about their current position and their career, what the background is, and after that you can ask questions. What I would like to point out though, due to lack of space on the stage, we have only 10 of us up here, but there are several of us also in the audience. Each one of us, I think, has valuable input that can be contributed. For example, I can see people from companies like Cisco, Infosys, etc. over there. So go ahead and ask a question, and I would encourage people from the audience also to participate in the discussion. Okay?
Maybe to ask, do you guys, most of you knew about it, or the information was not? Was there some?
What do you mean? Just put up on all the notice boards.
Which all are you guys? Was there enough information? All halls have enough
for quite a long time, and well, you won't have seen me around, but some other people have seen me around too much, cycling through the corridors.
I remember it in the 80s, early 80s.
That's right. So after BTech, I have spent out here time for the MTech, and after that for research into what I was developing at that time, the integrated Devanagari computer. So that's something which was commercialized right from here. And in 1988, I was here. And then when CDAC started in 1988, then I joined out there for furthering a technology which was renamed the GIST technology for handling all the Indian languages in the world. That was transferred out there to 25 companies, and a lot of products emanated from that, including that for subtitling in various languages. Then in 1996, I started this company, Numedia Technologies in Bangalore, and this company is the one which was started with one focus, that of making broadband solutions. What was a tough thing in the beginning, because after all, when you start off, there is no money, and for the first few years, you are primarily hunting for money. But after that, once you get a major investor, in my case, Reliance major shares, then after that, the speed comes in. So we have made set-top box and just about everything else which is needed for supporting the set-top box, that is the network elements. There will be a presentation after this which will be giving more details about that. So essentially, let us say the company and all the people, around 150 odd, they all essentially every day are dabbling in the cutting edge of the technology. In fact, what we have is something which we pride is ahead of the world. And we have made everything from the media, software content, to the hardware, nut and bolt. So this way, it's a holistic technology. That's what we call it. So any of you wanting to know more about it, we'll be able to give you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mohan. Actually, next I'd like to request Anuradha Devanagari to come up because she might have to leave a little early today.
I'm not very typical in many ways. One of the three girls in my batch when we arrived in 75. And I was doing physics. So the first question everyone asked was, what was your JEE rank? And the second was, why did you pick physics? So anyway, I stuck to physics. So I did an MS, integrated MS here. And then I went for a PhD. I went to Yale University, and it was a great place, but I found an advisor neighboring Brown University, so that's where I got the PhD. That was in 85. Then it's the classic scenario after PhD. You do several postdocs and you try to find a permanent job somewhere in your field. So I went to Rutgers University. That was my first postdoc. Worked with some famous condensed matter theorists there. Then I went to the West Coast, did a postdoc at UCLA, and I was teaching there. That was my first big teaching experience. Big classrooms, undergraduate physics. And those were still postdocs, so I had to look for a permanent job, and just turned out to have contacts in Paris, where I had been for schools and conferences. So I went to Paris and got another postdoc. It was in École Polytechnique. It's interesting because it's the equivalent of, I think, the IITs here. There's an entrance exam. People study for 2 years after their baccalaureate exam to get in. So it's very competitive. And people who come out have a very good scientific, technical training, but they usually end up becoming administrators. They're chiefs of enterprises, government. Not so many people go into founding companies. I think this place is unique for that. Anyhow, so I was doing basic research there, and then I applied for a job in the university, and to my surprise, although I didn't speak any French, they hired me. So I've been there for 14 years, and it's a nice place to be because it's a very concentrated place for science, all the mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, all in a small region around Paris, so it's making sport to do research. And I teach quite a bit on the others. So if you want to know anything about careers in physics or anything else, here.
Thank you, Ajay.
Thank you, AP. Well, I'll be relatively brief. After IIT, I went to Carnegie Mellon for my master's in computer engineering. And I worked after that for a couple of years in industry, Tandem Computers, did a little startup. Then in '85, went back to business school, went to Stanford, got a graduate degree in business. And then I've actually worked in management consulting. I was at Booz Allen and Hamilton there for 5 years. After Booz Allen, joined Sun Microsystems in marketing. So I was actually running worldwide marketing for the services group at Sun. And then I've since then started my own company. So raised a lot of venture capital. We've raised over $55 million in the last 7 years. We've got a team of about 120 people, roughly 70 in Bangalore, rest in the United States. And we sell software to help manage the performance of web-based applications. Our customers include people like eBay and E-Trade and Walmart.com, .com type of enterprises. So if anybody wants to get a sense of how one does a transition from technical background to kind of more the business side, still in technology, and how one goes about being an entrepreneur in the United States, happy to exchange some notes there. Right, thanks.
Thank you, Ajay. Hello. Hello, Noah.
Good morning. Glad to see someone feel brave to fought and come here. I'm going to paraphrase my experience as misquoting Robert Frost and saying, I took the road less traveled, but a long and winding way. So I did electrical engineering when I graduated, and ended up in University of Minnesota in electrical engineering, did a master's and a PhD. And the reason I said it was a road less traveled, instead of going into academic, I decided to go to corporate research in the US. Ended up spending 9 years at Honeywell. Did a lot of R&D, got pretty familiar with the DoD government and how the US government research works. Left in '94 and joined a small networking company. It's a public networking company in internet networking and security. Became the CTO, and that company got acquired by Storage Tech, so I faced a round of acquisitions as well. In '95, I essentially ended up in Storage Tech, which is a public storage systems company, and ran the R&D as a VP and chief architect. And again, part of the long and winding road, I got disillusioned by corporate and decided to strike out on my own. And similar to Ajay, I left in 2000, right when the bus was hitting, and started my first startup, Datavale, which was in storage software. That got acquired by a pre-IPO company called TreatPath Systems, which has since raised about $70 in venture capital money. I left after the acquisition, and in 2002, beginning of 2002, about 3 years ago, I'm on my second startup, which is called Copan Systems. It's a storage systems company also. So it's a little younger than Ajay's company. We've raised about $39 million in public venture money. And I'm the co-founder and CTO of that company. And we have up to 65 people, and we're shipping to Fortune 500 companies in the US. So hopefully it'll go well. And I'll extend the same offer that Ajay did to you, which is if you're curious about entrepreneurship and taking the what I call long and winding road through R&D and innovation, I'll be glad to talk to you. Thank you.
A slightly different tack than we're talking about the background. I want to tell you what are the two key high-level policies that motivated me to do what I did. So before I do that, let me tell you the key milestones in my life. Got a PhD from Johns Hopkins University in biomedical engineering. Then went off and started working with IBM, mostly in the personal computing division, dealing with advanced technology of personal computers. Followed by getting interested in speech recognition and went up to IBM Research in Crown Heights, New York, to set up a group in dealing with advanced speech recognition technologies. In particular, I was interested in what's called audio-visual speech recognition. That is, how do you combine visual speech information with audio to dramatically improve speech recognition and noise. Then generalize that problem to thinking about how humans use multiple sources of information, audio, visual, and text, to really dramatically demonstrate perceptual capabilities and build systems that do video analysis using audio, visual, and textual information. Finally, got interested in understanding how IBM actually makes the $90 billion of revenue, and decided to take on an assignment with IBM's Digital Media Group, whose total revenue is about $2.3 billion, as the Chief Technology Officer for that group. And since then, been interested really in getting a sense of how we assign and get faster routes to value for advanced technologies that come out of research labs. That's roughly the chronological sequence of what is happening. But two things, technically, my interest has always been understanding how humans perceive information. And from a professional point of view, as I said, I was interested in how we take advanced technologies and really create impact in both generating revenue for businesses like IBM. Thank you.
I went to University of Delaware. I did my MS in computer science. Then I joined AT&T Bell Labs in 1982. And I worked on several systems, Unix, telecom, all kinds of things. Finally, in 92, I left AT&T and I opened my own company, Unix Pros. In 2000, we had like 400 people working for us. We did a lot of work with Lucent, AT&T, US Army. A lot of the systems you saw in the 91 war, our people actually worked on it, the Iraq Gulf War at that time, the Kuwait War. In 2000, we were acquired by West Coast company, and since then I have been idle, retired, whatever. So if you want to know how to retire early, please let me know.
Anupam Sarwal.
I'm Anupam Sarwala. I think I'm very different from other people because I think I'm the only one who worked in US. I did my master's from Syracuse, and then I worked in California. But then in late 80s, I decided to move back to India. So I don't think any one of them has dared to do what I did. And Ajay used to be my roommate for 3 years there, and pardon me? Academics. But I'm talking about coming back to business. And so I moved back in the early 80s. Since then I was with the Apple distributors in India. Then I ran a manufacturing company. 5 years I did business consulting along with 2 other people. So now for the last 2 years I am with IBM Research, their lab in Delhi. So there I end up working closely with Chalapati. Chalapati is the Watson Center. And so I have kind of to summarize, have worked for large companies, small companies, startups. So fairly varied experience in business consulting and operations and technology. And currently I'm playing the role of taking technologies to market, and we are dealing with ASEAN countries and Middle Eastern countries. So it is fun. Anybody who wants to talk, I'm around. Thanks.
Hello everybody. I came here in '75 and as probably one of the few people who kind of got in here really interested in what I wanted to do. I was very interested in electronics and circuits and all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed my stay here. I'm a bit disappointed to see that all the audio equipment which is here is now Bose, of course. That time we used to build our own equipment. We used to build our own speakers, own audio systems, and this started from first year itself. First year, second year, third year. So by the time I got to my core courses, I already knew enough about what was being taught there and all the circuits, how to make the PCBs. So I had a really great time here, and of course there was the bonus of all the festival stuff with the audio guys being backstage and all that at that time, with all the girls backstage and all that kind of stuff. So that was the extra bonus. But seriously, when I finished my BTech here, I was one of the people who didn't go abroad. I looked around for jobs here, and at that time, you guys will probably laugh about the salary was like 1,500, 1,600 rupees, and these were all companies like HCL and DCM Data Product and all these kind of companies. And so I continued to work at IIT for another year or so. I then went to Holland, did my masters, and came back again. And then I started looking around for companies, and one of the criteria I followed was, hey, if there's a company which is investing seriously in terms of buying equipment and things like that. So I didn't worry too much about whether the company had a lot of business, market, all that kind of stuff. And so first company I worked was for Incomnet. I stayed there for about 8 years, and then came to Delhi, worked in another company for a year, but then found Hughes. Then I switched to Hughes Software System. This was in about 92 time frame. And again, the same criteria, people who are serious about doing technology. And I've been all my life in technology, as you can tell, I was so interested in it. And so then I joined Hughes, and these guys, of course, very seriously interested again. And I can dare say that I think that criteria worked well, and the company's done well. We're still doing a lot of technology stuff. We've grown well. We're about 3,500 people. And it's something which keeps me interested. So I look after a lot of big engineering division there. And also what I feel is from the time I started work, things have changed a lot in the sense that at one time maybe senior people, at least in India, in the Indian industry scene, it was not important for you to know a lot of technology deep down, but I think that's a lot today. So people who are at the senior level also need to participate in very key technology decisions. And so a lot of you who are interested in technology, I think I'd be very happy to take questions from you. Thanks.
Thank you. I see a number of you are coming in a little late and sitting way out in the back. I invite you all to come closer to the smaller group here. Alok Sabha.
Good morning, everyone. I am different from all these guys, apart from probably Anuradha. I am basically a chemical engineer from IIT Kanpur, and I have preferred to stay in what I would call real engineering, in inverted commas. These people talk a lot about technology. To me, technology is, to make things which we use every day. Okay, yes, IT has helped in evolving manufacturing or maybe even changing our day-to-day lives. But ultimately things which are used by human beings or even by animals, they have to be produced. I did my PhD from University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I came back. I come from a business family. Basically we are Marwadis, and my family already had some manufacturing businesses. So I came back to Gwalior, that is where I am based. We have some plastic units there. But to be in touch with chemical engineering, I also give consultancy in process engineering. And I have in fact given consultancy to almost all the oil companies in this country, Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, etc. Consulting is one area which in India is not that well recognized. It's very difficult to make people understand that anyone can contribute to make a process better. You know, people just go for technologies, okay, they'll go to Shell, they'll buy their technology, they'll buy their process. But I have seen that, every designer has a way of designing a plant, and if any other person looks at it, he can always find improvement in that. And I, agree with that philosophy in my own plant. I never give any kind of consultancy or try to do things. If anyone tells me that okay, I can do something better, I is always welcome. Because when you are, working or doing something in your own plant, you see it every day. Every day you are, repeating the mistake in a way. And only an outsider can come and have a real look at it and tell you where you actually are. But I have seen now over the last 2-3 years with the opening up of economy in this country, there are opportunities for consulting, and if you have proven yourself, then it becomes easier and easier. So you can, see me as an entrepreneur who is working in India. My factories employ about 1,000 people in Gwalior. People of very lower strata, people who are, just hard pressed to get money to eat. So we have that medium scale industry. At the same time, I give consultancy to one of the best companies here. Okay, I'll be glad to answer your questions if you have. Thank you.
Not trivial, trivial. So I hope that we can do this in the evening for ourselves, because I find it all very interesting. We haven't tried visiting ourselves very well. And if you see, almost everybody has claimed he's different from the rest, which shows the wide variety of things people are doing.
Now you find it really different.
How else is it different? That's why I'm very keen to know about others to find out more. In any case, so I went from here to do my master's at Penn State, and then the jobs didn't look very interesting or exciting, so I went for PhD, sort of like by default, and did that at Urbana-Champaign, and then joined University of Maryland as faculty member there I was there for 4 years. So since '89 I've been at IIT, but I've taken 2 stints out on leave. I've spent 2 years at Infosys in Bangalore, and a year and a half, I'm just coming back from there, from Microsoft in Redmond. So I guess over the years, the thing that probably I enjoyed most besides interacting with students was also writing. I sort of realized that I do have some abilities to write. So I've been able to write a couple of books, the textbook in software engineering, which actually turns out the Indian edition of it is probably used by maybe a third of the engineering colleges in India. Very, very satisfying thing when you find out that your own book is pirated in India. So the publisher calls you, very sorry sir, it's being pirated, and I said, well, it means it must, lots of people must want it files and some files. To a graduate level textbook in fault tolerant computing, and based on my thesis work, I wrote 2 books on very practitioners.
The Chinese people are pirating it.
No, the Chinese guys taking copyright and are paying royalty.
Oh, okay.
So this book based on Infosys has gone in like 7-8 different languages, and including the Chinese have taken the actual copyright and not done the medical route, and taken the copyright, asked me to write a preface for Chinese edition, asked my photograph and put it in there. So this has been reasonably satisfying, and this back and forth between industry and academia has been actually very, very good. So someone who's interested in academics, mixture of the two, can probably talk to me. Okay.
Doing electrical engineering, sometimes I wonder how I did graduate. I used to spend more time outside the class rather than in there. Very active in campus politics. I happened to be the president of the student gymkhana in the final year. I began my career in India. I worked for 2 years for Metal Box and a year for IBM, and then got a travel bug to go to the US.
Anyway, interest me to lower confidence, so I don't have to do a PhD. PhD is, I think, already much more specialized and you're less interested for a number of reasons. You're much older, and companies don't want people who have their own opinions. So I think it's PhD only for those who really want to go in for studying something in great depth. And once you've done a PhD, of course, you can always stop and opt out and do other things. You can do, at each stage you ask yourself where you want to go and what the opportunities are. It's pretty diverse.
Difficult for startups to do an IPO. 4 or 5 years ago, it was much easier to do that.
IPO means being bought up.
Going
public.
IPO
is going public.
The way you actually go public and trade on the public stock market. It's a lot more complex now. In the US, they have Sarbanes-Oxley, where just the cost to run a public company is $3 million a year. All the reporting and all the other things it has to do. So, in addition, in the US today, there's a lot of consolidation happening in the industry. Customers want to buy from fewer and fewer companies. So a lot of startups, for them, a good exit is to get bought out by a big company at a fair value.
So I'll give you the, again, venture fund advice. I will obviously have the non-venture fund advice. I agree with Ajay. Since post-2000, as we all thought it was the first traditional exit of going in IPO is exceptional. And the one exception that all along was true. That was an amazing example, and the company had a huge revenue. And the way that works is, you get to a point where your revenue is so large and the valuation is so large, someone can afford it. If you're $1 billion, no one has $1 billion sitting in cash and start giving away, unlike maybe 99. So more and more, the acquisitions that most startups are looking at practical are in fact buyouts or acquisitions. And then it becomes, what's your valuation, what market you're in, how much times revenue, market cap, what unique technology, all those factors. So we are in the enterprise space, which we still the Fortune 500. So we are big ticket items. One of the biggest difficulties also quickly, the other reason is challenge the market. If you're an ideal customer, you don't buy from a startup, it's competitive. So that's one of the issues. So more than likely than not, I would say it is an acquisition for most startups. However, when someone asks me that question in a formal setting, I said, whichever exits work best for the stakeholders and the investors.
Different atmosphere of research in Europe and US means most of people after graduation here are looking for a PhD in US, not in Europe. Means is that the opportunity after getting a PhD in US is more than the Europe, but both the scenario in Europe and US both are rich countries, but they are rich countries. But why people are preferring to get a PhD in US? Is the problem?
I think the US facilitates people coming. They really encourage, they welcome you. In Europe, it's not so much, it's not so common for people to go there. Of course, if you already knew people there, you know where to go to apply for funding, then you can do a PhD there. There are very few people like this. I think the problem is the information, also the infrastructure is not set up for welcoming. But this will change because the student population in France and Germany, these two countries I know something about, is going down dramatically. We need young people doing the hard sciences, doing kinds of. So I think they're going to go out recruiting, but these countries are very bureaucratic, very slow, and this may take many years to happen. So I'd say that and the language problem, very obvious. Most people don't want to go in a country where they're not able to communicate easily, for the first 6 months or so. So, yeah, unless you take language here, it's a little bit difficult at first. But otherwise, there are places to go to.
What's the opportunity of doing, getting a good job in India, not going out US or Europe or somewhere else, getting a good job in India?
If you see where is the action land today? The action is in Asia. The bulk of the manufacturing is taking place in Asia. The economic growth in Asia, like China is growing at about 10%, and India is growing from 6 to 8%. So there's a lot of action taking place, there's a lot of technical people required, a lot of managerial skills required. And I just tell you, I was metallurgical engineer, and I can really say that I'm absolutely different from guys who are here. I matches at that time. Aero was probably the last, and Metallurgical and Civil used to compete for each other for the second and third spot. And I was not one of those either 9+ pointers or things like that. I was more moderate, something like closer to 8 or something like that. And I started my very traditional way. I started with the Steel Authority, and I was there for 1 year. Of course, we were selected from campus, and then I went to a marketing company, Grace Prosecco, worked there for about 6 years. Went to Armani Malikan, sold industrial products again there. Then went to another ceramic company, Government Universal in South, where I sold products on all-India basis and also on a lot of exports and all. I had a chance to create markets and distribution networks in the US and Australia and things like that. And in 1998, I was selected as Fulbright Scholar to undergo a business leadership program at CMU, Carnegie Mellon, for 4 months. So I was in India, but I was doing everything, so you get to keep yourself focused. And for the last 4 years, I'm running a company. I'm the Chief Executive Officer in Tata Group, and to give you some sense, I can only say that I report to the person who reports to Mr. Tata. So I have a 2-level reporting to Mr. Tata today, and I have 3 factories today, 2 in Pune and 1 in Chennai, turnover of nearly $45 million, 5 years old company. And next 5 years, we are going to be about $200 million, creating 7 factories, global production centers here. So, well, all of you, since you are right in time, you could be a friend for my company also, you are welcome there. Thank you.
No, I would like Mohan Kamble, Saranwala, and Sabu to give a perspective on business in India, in the sense that they have also, even within India, they have such a variety of different kind of fields that they would be saying.
Don't usurp his role as moderator.
Just asking you a question.
Indeed. Let's say I was just telling him while you were hearing the previous speaker that getting a job today is not a problem, and getting an IT job is least of the problem. Everyone today, just tell me who cannot get an IT job. There are call center people who call themselves IT specialists, and after that they graduate to whatever. I have instances of people who were not even technicians, etc., who just did some computer courses, etc., and today they are computer professionals. Anyone from any place, Google, colleges, etc., they all can be IT people. What is the big deal in IT? You need just PCs, and you need to just tinker around, and you are an IT professional. And there's nothing wrong in it. In fact, we have, at our place, stopped bothering about the resumes. There are a lot of resume making packages, and today you can really turn out a glossy resume and you can fill it up with just about everything which is not true. What's the big point? We discover only afterwards of how little the resume meant. So what we do is to actually test out the person by giving him some small problem which requires some of his own analytical skills. So anyone who has a skill, even if he does not have any formal degree, not just from IIT but even from any of the engineering colleges, is good enough. Some of the top people we have, they essentially have done some modest courses, say they are even say BSc chemistry or whatever, but they're pretty good in software. Now, who will you take? Somebody who is really good in software, or somebody who has got an MTech degree or whatever else from a fancy place, but who just doesn't know what the things are all about. To further embellish the example, the CTO of software in our company, he started off as a maintenance engineer. He was the one who was running around the different cable headends, maintaining the servers. And he found a lot of problems which none of the so-called software people were kind of sorting out at the speed required. So he started off by patching up a little bit what he could do on his own, learn the C language. That way he continuously improved himself in a manner that today he is the most resourceful person and he is guiding everyone else
you may have whatever degrees. Most of the people in US, India, wherever are self-made. Today, I'm glad to see that most of you have a PC engineering. What you do yourself, apart from the curriculum, makes a lot of difference because that is what is your knowledge, which cannot go away. So let us say jobs are not an issue. The issue is what is it that you have to offer which can make difference in any organization. And if you can do that, there will be organization vying to get you. So therefore, decide for yourself.
Local markets. And the characteristics of the companies, how they approach, the kind of people they hire, and the kind of skill set they need is very different. So in terms of getting jobs, IT professionals, export companies are hiring in the kind of hundreds. And so anybody who has done decent education, I don't think get job is any issue. But if you are addressing the local markets, I think the challenges are very different. It is a very price sensitive market, and quality is always, there is a very major trade-off between price and performance in terms of quality. So, and there the number of jobs are not as many. I think overall the projections are that Indian market is growing. India and China are only two countries growing. So there are going to be a lot of opportunities even for local markets. And one trend which we have observed within IBM also, a lot of people who were in the US and professional careers there, they have started coming back, which I think is a very good sign for India as an economy, because the experience which all of us gain working in the US or Europe is very relevant to India, and I think it's a tremendous place to be in right now.
Manufacturing in India is, it's my opinion, is likely to grow because more and more, you can actually look at any business as two parts. One is marketing and one is production. And slowly, gradually, what is going to happen, there will be two distinct business, business groups. There will be a business group which will be very, very efficient in producing. And there will be another set of business group which will be very good in marketing. Now, traditionally, the two functions have been combined. Most of the big companies will have both the marketing and this. But over the years now, you will see that many consumer good companies, particularly FMCGs, they are outsourcing their manufacturing. And this trend is going to grow. Today, you would be amazed to hear, but today companies like Hindustan Lever, they produce only 20% of the stuff which you actually buy thinking it's a lever product. And what is happening is, there's one company in Gwalior, Godrej Soaps. It used to be Godrej Soaps. Today, they are manufacturing volumes. So they will talk of tonnages and tonnages, and they'll only produce. And there'll be companies who will build brands and sell the products. Now, manufacturing should come to India now, and that is happening. A lot of, although Indian companies are now going to China for manufacturing because Indian costs are still higher compared to China. There are a lot of tire companies now who have taken up companies on lease in China and manufacturing tires over there. So this thing is going to continue to happen. World is going to become smaller in that way, that wherever you have got cheaper manufacturing infrastructure, manufacturing is going to go there. You'll be quite surprised to know there are many companies, even in traditional things like we are making plastic woven bags. Now countries are coming up who are producing plastic woven bags which are marketed everywhere by everyone else. So Europeans, they've stopped producing these. So they buy and market the products. They buy from Indonesia, they buy from India. So all these countries which have got cheaper labor, etc., they are going to become the workhouses of the world. And
is it the immediate thing? So immediate you say I'm getting a 4 lakh package, that's not good enough. I can go to US, make $40,000, $50,000. Okay? But you have to look at 5 years from now. So in US you may start as a programmer and 10 years down the road you will still be a programmer most of the cases. Okay? Most of the cases today. In fact, you may not be even a programmer and may be out of a job. Okay? But here you'll find, you look at 4 years, the guy jumping around left center, moving to other places, growing very rapidly. And that, I think, is the key in this growth that he mentioned about Asian and all that, is the future prospects are very, very good today. Even though you may find a lot of companies not giving a very good opening package. If you're able to look at 5 years ahead, you may find a much brighter picture than you say where there's 50,000 rupees.
And this is happening in traditional industries also. You know, just recently I was at Reliance. The chemical engineers there now, I don't know whatever start they are going to say, but they got a jump of 10,000, 15,000 rupees, actual growth this year. So, because they are being forced to compete, their people are just leaving here, they are going to, Malaysia, they are going to Dubai. So, to retain them, they are also increasing their salaries. So, Indian salaries are
very, very limited. And if you see, a lot of our classmates went to the US, even chemical engineers became IT guys, computer science degrees, etc. Because the high-tech sector, even though the US economy was growing 3 to 4% a year, the high-tech sector was growing 20, 25% a year. Right? So the bottom line is, if you have a sector in the local economy that's growing at 20, 30, 40% a year, those are sectors that are going to create a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities. You'll rise much faster in those kind of opportunities. And India now has that. India, by and large, has now several sectors that are world competitive levels and that are rising to that level.
It's a gateway to job. So that is not a problem. What would happen, what they think about their teacher, and how do you think the interaction should be better? If it is, then how do you improve it?
I think
our benchmarks should be addressed to some other.
You can give your suggestions, right?
Yeah, it's in a nutshell, it's always desirable, but when you go into it, you have to really look. These are hard things. You can't. No university in the world has the type of interaction you get with these. So I don't think these are. It may be very desirable to be able to go to somebody's home and all that, but it's not really significant.
But we'd like Ishwaran and Praveen to answer. They are our representatives.
Seeing this from a perspective of something like, so as the class size grew bigger and bigger, we had a class size of something like 200, 220 or something. We are now talking about class sizes of 450. As the class sizes become bigger, it becomes more and more difficult for the faculty to start interacting with students and individuals. That's second point is that the undergraduate program has, in the beginning, it was absolute, the jewel in the crown of IITs. Everybody, all the faculty were very, very into the undergraduate program. I mean, this is the kind of the Sienna Rao decade. What has happened is that the emphasis has shifted more to research. Now, younger faculty members are much more into research. They are not so much into undergraduate teaching. There's a fall in interaction because of that also. But then, if you see, I think. You ask the postgraduate students, I think the postgraduate students in the 70s were given a raw deal, but then now they are
on the stage, and the interaction was pretty limited. After that, we went to the teaching assistant for pretty much PhD postdoc students, and those were all pretty much we saw. It was later on when you got into fourth year and your final year, that's when into your departments the interaction got closer. Into your project, you had a project, somebody, a professor that was guiding you through the project. That's when the interaction really got closer. But in the initial years, it was big lectures and a lot of TAs.
I'd like to add to see, it's very important that the faculty and the communication is two-way. Because that is the important link which builds the personality. In future, in case you are just academically very good, but your overall personality is not good, you don't succeed in life. So this is, I would say that academics is as important as your communication with the faculty. And when you are performing the job, when you are handling the people, this will play a very big role. So I would suggest the faculty maybe to constitute a committee. This allows you to reflect in the disaster side. It is very, very important. You must give. Because this is going to play a very big role in their personality. To put things in perspective, it must be done because what we are talking about right now in the business scenario and everything, I know we have just entered into very difficult things. Unless you are fully competent, you are entrepreneurship quality, unless in all the faculty, whether it's management, finance management, or any kind of thing we are talking about,
because they say it's a great waste of faculty resources. We don't have the resources to put into the first 2 years of the undergraduate program. It's only after that they'll come into the UC system. This proposal is being seriously considered. I'm not saying we should go that far, but as Ishwar put it, we have been putting far too much time and energy into undergraduate education. Now we're trying to build up graduate programs. So we have, this sort of thing is not to occur.
I would just like to add a perspective to that. I remember some of the teachers we had. The core courses, I think the size is so big that's impossible. But I do remember that during during the branch courses, we were in electrical engineering. We had a number of people there who kind of made the effort to know people individually. And it was not after the class, this was during the class. So I mean, after the class is something else, But during the class, once that bond got established of knowing people individually, after the class naturally happened. I mean, I don't think there was any. So I think it begins with inside the class, and that's the perspective I wanted to add.
But apart from
just after the class, you chatted with that person for 2 minutes. So it built a relationship.
You build a rapport with
you. Build a rapport, and that used to happen. I won't say it happened with the whole class, maybe, but it happened with quite a few teachers talked to quite a few of the students.
Individual.
I think there are a lot of other questions also. Let's move on to other questions.
Now I want to come in management field and I want to ask what are the various qualities we should have and what are the qualities we should concentrate during our undergraduate courses so that they help us in when they come in management field, and what are the various problems with the usually faced during when we start our companies or whatever when we come in management field. And it is good or it is good to do MBA, it is good to do MBA or it is just to after doing your courses come in all the guys.
Management, and what is there a point into the MBA after management, that's the kind of question. Well, this is just my perspective and others can add on to it later. I think in terms of moving into management and getting into the management field, it's good to get an education in management at some point in time. Because you learn things in a structured fashion. Now, whether you do it right after school or not is a debatable question. So there are both schools of thought. One school of thought very clearly says that to gain most from it, it's better to go work in the industry for a while and then come back to school, so that you can understand and appreciate the problems much better. And some business schools in fact encourage that. On the other hand, it is often more convenient to carry on from one education program to the next one, then move further. And there are still others who will tell you equally strong terms that best school of learning for management is actually working. If you work for a good, well-managed company, opportunities will be provided for you to learn on the job and learn the skills in management that you need as you rise up the organization chain. So,
like most of us that time was going abroad there. Most of us, in fact, like I think 50-60% of us went abroad there. But then some of us decided to go for civil services there. And myself, Alok Prasad of this batch, and then Tayal and Baki Jai. 4 of us did join civil services. That's one option. But these days, I don't know what was discussion going on right now. But as I interacted with some of the students these days, probably getting a scholarship for MTech is difficult. And they're getting scholarship only for PhDs and all. So most of them are trying for IM, CAD career and related things. Probably when I interact with you more, probably I can be able to understand. But then this option is still open. Seats are few and the competition is really tough. There also, like JEE has become much strict these days as compared to our times. So administrative surveys, police surveys, and this related revenue services like income tax and customs and all. The area is open there also, and one can try his luck, his hand there also. Anything you want to ask related to these services, I can tell you.
The frustration level there high or low because of
This level depends on how you cope with the frustration. That is everywhere, you know, like Ajay Singh was narrating his experiences. Someone that opening his own company, something like that, he told how do you cope up with it. That is everywhere. Here also, like JEE when you opted, there also the lot of competition was there. Frustration was there also. Some of you didn't get in the first attempt. They were frustrated. Probably second attempt they could achieve it. So this is part of the overall scenario. So you cope up.
Can I add a perspective?
Yeah, different person. Different angle. I joined this service in 82. I wrote express now. And then Alok of our batch, he joined in 83. Manki Bihari joined in after this IM 85. After this IM MBA degree from Ahmedabad. And Tayar probably wrote in 82. So, but then it was not much popular then, I would say. The later years it picked up, and the batches, I think from 80, those who passed out in 83 and all, 83, 84 subsequently. Not many of us went for these services then, not many. In particular, there were a dozen IS officers from that batch. I think maybe more than that. What do you mean? And in 1 year, that was I think 2000 or something like that. Top 10, out of top 10, 6 were from IT in IS. Ajay's schoolmate is also IS, so my batch. So that's why he wants to.
How much justice you have done with your BTech degree by pursuing the IS? So what do you think? How much justice you have done with your BTech degree? Spending 4 years in IT.
I can't really justify that way the technical degree out here and then doing something other than that. But see, if you join IS, then I happen to be an IPS. But if you join IS, there are not many opportunities, not many. You are heading DST, you will be heading some terminal. Options are much wider over there. And in my case also, I can opt out, I can go to some assignment in UN, I can go to some, that lateral shift is possible there also. That is one thing. Then another thing is this question is asked in the interview also. There also UPSC will ask this question. After doing all this hard work here, they and 4-5 years later, why do you? But then you do shift. Like many of us, you take example. Some of you get directly with the degree they are obtained over here. They might have shifted some other area.
I want to ask a question to everybody. It means less than 5% of entrepreneurship is successful in India, and most of the MBAs ultimately handing into either the financial jobs or jobs which are not mainly handling the technologies. And they are the IT guys who can really do wonders in the technology, and they'll be gifted by a very good type of education that's been provided here. So how much justice you think that a person can do with his BTech degree or a MTech degree and then pursue a completely different skill?
Like BTech degree out here is giving you a kind of a mindset that is giving you a way to think, way to act. It's not merely that in 4 years thing you will not be even applying if you join some hardcore engineering company also. You will be doing something, managing things or maybe finance side or maybe marketing side. So the degree out here is not necessarily meant that unless you go deeper into some PhD thing or the core technology thing or core science group, then probably you will apply whatever things you did here in tutorials and lectures, all those things. But then, it depends. It is not always that you carry on what you studied here and then in that area only you will proceed. Of course you can do that. You can go in for research works and associated labs and all those things. You can pursue your career. And some of us are doing that also.
Can I say something?
Like some of us are in too many universities, not many of us are doing those assignments.
We had guys like Ajay saying who are 10 pointers and blah blah, the whole game, right? But you still passed and you were, so that's the key. When you will go in your life and open your own business or whatever, the important thing will be that the training that you took at IIT is what will count. The courses are fine. I mean, you learn, you know calculus and all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, it's what the desire to succeed, the motivation, and the fact that you're in IIT and you can succeed at any point. Okay, whether you're in the US, India, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. That's the training you have to learn. Okay, everything else is second. And that's what we got, and that's what the desire came when we came to US. I mean, imagining going from here, there to a different country, and succeeding there is a tremendous achievement in itself. But see, just because we are IITians, and I think that's the reason if you see all over the world, IITs are succeeding en masse because of this goal. So that's what you're getting, not the, I mean, that's great, the technical degree and everything, but the desire to succeed, to really do well and do it.
I think I'm from the same batch. I think Arvind almost summarized the point I came to make here. A lot of questions have been around what career to pursue, etc. I think a lot of people stay true to their core discipline, but majority, I would say, probably are doing something which doesn't relate directly to what they started off here with. And as Arvind said, it's the foundation that you develop here that makes you successful. The simple point I want to make, if I have to give one advice to your generation now, I would say whatever you do, all of you sitting in this room have the capability, the capacity, the intellect to be highly successful in life. I know that. We all did. One simple advice I would give you is whatever you do, it doesn't matter whether you go to civil services, whether you go into MBA or do PhD and become a professor. Eventually, assuming you will apply yourself in the right fashion, you channel your energies properly, all of you will be successful. And at the end of the day, it will not matter whether you have 10 crore rupees or 5 crore rupees or $10 million. You'll be very comfortable. So one simple advice, whatever you do it with passion. If you have passion for anything, pursue that. And the challenges you face will lead you to the right path. But make sure you do whatever you do it with passion. Whether it's
exciting demonstration of the choice pad technology by Mohan Tambe. And one thing Mohan didn't mention to you while he was introducing himself, that he is actually a recipient of a Distinguished Alumnus Award also.
You even know the meanings of some of the words, as Govinda. Once you know enough of the group and want to see what they actually done, that's on a poster. And right now I've got two of the ones here. Brown Girl in the Ring. By the way, when you're moving up and down, you will sing out one line of the song so that you can immediately recognize it. Yeah. What's that? What are the columns there? Yeah, V is for video, A for audio, K for karaoke, I for instrumental. So therefore there can be 4 versions of the same songs. The video version, the audio version, the karaoke version, and the instrumental version. So out here we have the video and the audio versions. I'll show you the different ones. But which one would you prefer out of these two? No, video. Videos, in fact that's what I found. With the choice pad around, audio has got no takers. Okay? So let's get into